My name's Courtney Honeycutt, and this is my game called Kingdoms. So, the objective of the game is to take over the other player's castle. So, in order to do that, you have to strategically win battles over cities to get their stats in order to siege the castle. So, during the first round of play, which isn't shown in the video, each player will place a pawn, which represents 20 soldiers, with within 4 spaces of the castle. They'll place it at a town, which is one of the smallest circles, and they do not have to combat with this town. So they will get that benefits, and no matter what city, town, or major city you take, you keep the benefits even when your pawns are off of it. But when you leave it, whenever the enemy player comes to take over your city, he doesn't have to fight for it like he would one that's being protected. So to decide who goes first, both players will roll a 1d20, and the player with the highest roll goes first. You can only move your armies 2 grid pieces per round except for the first round. And each army gets a turn of combat and movement. So when you're taking over a town or city, to calculate your first hit, you have to roll a 1d20 based off of what the city town's defense is. So usually towns will have lower, and then smaller cities will have a little bit higher, and the major cities have the highest after the castles. So when you're doing damage, you roll a 1d6, and certain cities and towns would give you additional like an attack or roll modifier. So whenever you are trying to take over a city and you are rolling, if you roll above the defense, if you roll above the defense, you will get to roll for damage on the city, but if you roll below or equal to the city or town's defense, you have 3 options. So those options are: you can regroup, and you can send a second garrison of troops within 4 grid places away from you, and you can only do so if those troops are around you. So these troops will assist you on your next turn, and they will give you a +2 hit chance and a +2 defense rating at the beginning of your next turn. So your second option is to retreat, so you move 2 spaces towards your base, and you may not set up for an assault on a city, town, or keep your next turn. So we do that a lot in ours, like in our gameplay right here, because it's we never did use overcome though, which is the third option. So what you do is you attempt to roll the hit die, but when you do that, your opponent gets to take 2 turns prior to your attempt to overcome your losses. So what that means is that your opponent gets to take 2 turns after you try to overcome. And so whenever you are trying to take a city or town away from an enemy player, so you can basically, what happens is that you attack the player and not the city. And one of the things that you can do is you can have a surprise attack, which You roll to hit against the enemy player's army, and if you score a successful hit on your turn to initiate, immediately eliminate the opponent's army or one pawn piece from the field of play. If you fail to roll, you must take the retreat action. You can, when you retreat from that though, you can't go up and attack the players inside the keep on your next turn. That includes castles too. And you can combat player pieces outside of castles, and the fighting is basically kind of the same as trying to fight a castle, except you're using the health and defense of your player pieces, which is your base defense is 11 and your base HP is 6, and for your attacks you still roll a 1d6. So whenever you go, and then whenever you're gonna go and you get up to the enemy player's castle, you can just roll to hit it like you would normally on a regular city, except if there are, instead of just fighting the troops inside, if there are troops inside, which there should be, because the benefit of this is that you get +1 castle defense for each pawn, and your castles start off with a base defense of 15 and a base HP of 20, so it helps a lot to have pawns in there, especially if you can also get plus any modifier for castle defense from any nearby cities or towns. And lastly, I'm just gonna list what each town is and their health, defense, and attack modifiers. So starting off with towns, which are the smallest, they have the lowest HP, defense, and they give the smallest attack. They give the least when we're talking about attack modifiers. So there's Edith, has 4 HP, 6 defense, it gives +1 soldier defense. Allville, 3 health, 8 defense, +1 to attack roll. Nettleton, 5 HP, 10 defense, +20 soldiers, which is 1 pawn piece that goes into your castle. Dunville, 3 HP, 7 defense, +1 to hit roll. Stewartsville, 4 HP, 9 defense, +1 to hit roll. Fort Reinhold, 5 HP, 10 defense, +20 soldiers, like I said, another pawn piece. Fort Walton, 2 HP, 6 defense, +1 to attack roll. Bristol Island, 5 HP, 12 defense, +1 to castle defense. Millbrook, 4 HP, 8 defense, +1 soldier defense. Stanfield, 4 HP, 7 defense, +1 to attack roll. Small cities, there's Etheridge, 6 HP, 13 defense, and +5 to attack roll. Vanceboro, 8 HP, 11 defense, +5 soldier defense. Butterfield, 8 HP, 13 defense, +40 soldiers, which is 2 pawn pieces. Brigantine, 6 HP, 11 defense, +5 to hit roll. Keystone, 7 HP, 14 defense, +5 castle defense. Heartland, 7 HP, 14 defense, +40 soldiers, or 2 pawn pieces. And lastly, Keeps, so we have Climegrow, which is 11 HP and 16 defense, and you get +60 soldiers, so that's 3 pawn pieces. And all of the rest of the keeps have the same amount of HP and defense, so I'm just gonna list their affixes, which is Groveton, which gives you +40 soldiers and +5 to attack roll. Old Milford, which gives you +20 soldiers and +10 castle defense. West Bernstadt, which gives you +40 soldiers and +5 soldier defense. So an important part of the game is to write down everything. So you write down your damage done to keeps, you write down your damage done to small towns, cities, you write down your damage done to each of your pawns that takes damage, and the damage, well, the other person should have keep track of their damage on their pawns. But it's important to take, like, there were certain times during our gameplay where we got very confused because we forgot to write down, like, how much HP was left on certain keeps, or on especially pawns when we got to the PvP part of our game, which you can see here. We started fighting each other at my castle, but the player I played with thought that his side had an unfair advantage because of how close the cities and towns are to his side, and he said that might be a problem with my gameplay, but I ended up winning, not because it was my game, but because he definitely read the rules over very well. But because I had, although he did have more pawns coming towards my castle, I kept pawns in the castle, or I moved them back whenever I realized that he was coming forward to attack mine, and I had kept a pawn piece on what I thought to be some of the most important modifiers, so which was the +5 to attack roll, which was my 1d20. So it was very important, especially when I was fighting the castle, that I had that, because the castle's defense was what, 16, 15 plus whatever he had for castle defense modifiers. I forgot. I think it was around, it didn't matter. But I had that, plus I ended up having +5, 10, 11 to my 1d20. So I almost hit on everything, and I had a +2 modifier on what damage I did do. So I ended up, it's kind of like a base race. I beat his castle before he could take over any of my +5 to attack rolls, my attack roll cities, so he couldn't take over Etheridge, and he couldn't take over Groveton, or was it Brigantine? It was, wait, I think it was Brigantine, and then Brigantine and Etheridge, yeah, those two. So, oh gosh. So I kept pawns on what cities I thought were important, which made it harder for him to take over, because he, instead of having to roll for whatever he would normally on the city, he had to roll for what my soldier defense was, which I believe I had just, what's it normally? I got up to 17. So I had +6 soldier defense, and he did too, but it helped, especially when he wanted to take over cities. So it's just taking over what cities you think are the most important. Like, for example, although it is good to have more soldiers, it's better to have those attack modifiers, because rolling modifiers, whatever, it was a lot better for me to have those than it was to have, well, I also had, actually I had the max amount of soldiers that I could have, so that was probably something else that helped me. Even though he did defeat a few of mine, I still had about 3 at his castle, even though he had 4 at mine. 4 to 5, he had 5, I think. But yeah, I won. It was a very drawn out game. I only have about, I think, 45 minutes of it recorded, and it went a little bit longer than that, and I sped up the video. So thank you for watching. I recorded this on tabletop. I uploaded the background image that I had made earlier on like a Google drawing. It's very simple, but it got the job done. And then I spawned the pawn pieces and die that we used, and we wrote down the rules in the book, so that in the notepad, so it was easy to access instead of me having to alt tab out, because I don't have a second monitor. And it was fun. It was pretty confusing, but it was fun. And I hope that if you guys ever play it, you enjoy it too. Thank you.